Welcome to the Ekta podcast, where we think together about unity and solidarity, or Ekta, on campus. In the Ekta podcast, we take time out to listen to students as they share their stories about what has made them feel powerful and powerless in their university journeys, and to hear their thoughts on practical steps that we can take to create more inclusive spaces at UFE. Let's learn differently together. Ekta. So welcome to Ekta, a podcast about creating unity by understanding different learning experiences here at the University of the Fraser Valley. So I am very grateful to be here today in the studio at CIVL, which is located on Stalo-Tumek, and that's the sacred land of the Stalo people. And today I have the really wonderful pleasure of chatting with Mohammed Bearingwala, a former international student from Mumbai, India, who came here to UFE in 2018. And he now works with us, yay, at the IT department as an analyst. So welcome, Mohammed.
Thank you so much, Victoria. Yes.
So Mohammed and I are going to talk a little bit about his experience with the school system in India. Especially those infamous board exams. So we'll just start getting to know you a little bit, Mohammed. Can you tell us about yourself?
Absolutely. First of all, I'm impressed that you pronounced my last name correctly. People struggle with that. But yeah, as you said, Mohammed Bearingwala from Mumbai, came here in fall of 2018. I graduated with a bachelor's of computer information systems. And now I've been working with UFE, been almost 4 years of employment with UFE.
So then I know that you are supremely multilingual. Tell us a little bit about all the languages that you speak.
Yeah, it comes with being a national of a country which is so diverse. So I speak a total of 5 languages. English, obviously, because that's the medium we learnt in. Hindi, because it's the national language. Marathi, because it's the regional language. So we are taught all 3, English, Hindi and Marathi in school. Gujarati, because that's my mother tongue. So I speak that at home. And Urdu. I'm from a Muslim background, so Urdu is quite common within Muslims. And yeah, I speak Urdu as well.
So, I mean, a lot of this diversity comes from the fact that you are from Mumbai, right? And there's 23 million people in Mumbai, which is crazy. That's so many. And you mentioned that you're from a particular community, a particular Muslim community. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we are a comparatively smaller sect of Muslims. We call ourselves the Dawoodi Bohras. But in Canada, we are not as many. So especially in the lower mainland, we're around 40, 50 families, maybe. Our ancestors, the Dawoodi Bohras, are the Shia followers. So we followed the Shia belief for a while, and then we diverted at a point in time. And then now we have our own beliefs and then the Shia belief. But there's a lot of overlap.
I think that's so important to recognize that the Muslim community is not a unified single community. Much like the Christian community, there are many different ways to practice that faith, many communities of churches, just like for the Muslim faith. So I think that's a really helpful thing for us to remember, that diversity within that as well. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about your school experience before you came to UFE, so in Mumbai, in India. Tell me a little bit about where you went to school, and maybe we can talk a little bit about these famous board exams as well.
Sure, yeah. The school I went to was called St. Mary's High School SSE. SSE because that's the board that the school followed. So we have different educational boards in India. So there is the ICSE board, there is the CBSE board, and there is then the state board, SSE in my case, because that's the Maharashtra state board. So I went to the school which followed the Maharashtra state board, so hence St. Mary's High School SSE. But right across the street was our sister school, which is the St. Mary's School ICSE.
Okay, right. So this is interesting. So then there's board exams, which are a little bit like our provincial exams. And then there's also a board exam that is for a national curriculum. And then there's an additional one as well called open schooling, from what I can see. And so these board exams are administered in grade 10 and then again in grade 12. And they seem to be really, really important to enter into
post-secondary education. And the pressure there is extremely high. So from the articles that I was able to read, some of the limited amount of employment opportunities means that excelling on these board exams is really, really key. And I know that this is starting to result now in some suicides related to these things. So these are incredibly impactful. So can you tell us a little bit about the climate of that, of what it's like to be studying for those exams, how you study for those exams, etc.?
Yeah, unfortunately, that is the sad reality. There is immense pressure because of the competition. The board exam marks are crucial to get into the college of your choosing, and this college would be then termed as degree college.
But you mentioned terminology, and I want to take a moment to pause because I think this is kind of funny. Even when we were having our conversations, we really had to get this straightened out between us so that we could have a good conversation. So the first one that I have on here is the word program. So program here, we're referring to, your degree. If you're getting a certificate or a diploma, that would probably be your program. What would you call that in India?
Yeah, we don't usually call it program. We just call it the course that you are in, right? Or the degree that you're in. Yeah.
Okay, so course. So you're calling the whole program a course.
Yeah.
And so we would call a course one class. And so what would you call a course?
A course would be a subject.
A subject.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so subjects for us often, it makes us think of high school, right? So we're talking about subjects in high school. So that's interesting. Okay, so that's the whole course. Now, what about a lecture?
In school, we call it a period, but then as you go into college, it slowly turns into a lecture. I guess that's the same here as well.
Okay, so a lecture could be called a period. And then this was one that I thought was really fascinating, was tuition.
So tuition is basically tutoring outside of the school. It's quite a popular concept in India. To take a step back, after grade 12, you get into degree college, right? But that's your board exam marks are not enough. Then you have to give a competitive exam as well. So, for example, if you're doing engineering, there is an exam called JEE, medicine, engineering,
Law.
chartered accountants, law. So these professions do require you to give a competency exam. So your entry criteria into these programs depends on how much you score in your board exams and how much you score in these set exams, right? So I appeared for something called as the NATA, which is the National Aptitude Test for Architecture, because I wanted to pursue architecture back then. So my final score, based on which I would get into a school, would be the average of my boards and my NATA exam. I didn't do very well, but we'll move past that. But circling back to the tuition topic, right? These competency exams are so competitive that just the school is not always enough. These students, what they do is they would go to the tuition classes, is how they call it, and they would learn the exact same thing that the school is supposed to teach. The classes will start before the school starts. Let's say the semester begins in August, for example. The classes will start in April when you are done with your grade 11. And this is just an example because in reality, you start right after grade 10. So the 2 years, 11 and 12, the tuition classes is where you are studying for the competitive exam, whereas the school is where you are studying your board exam material. And I say that very loosely because the school, basically you just are going there for practical exams. So you are essentially going to school just to give the practical exam because you can't do that at your tuition classes, right? So that's one. And any kind of exams you have to go to the college because you still have to appear for the boards. Without the boards, nothing really matters. So that does take priority. But the thing is that what you study in the tuition classes also prepares you for the boards because the curriculum is the same. It's very expensive. And this is not just after high school. This goes on from grade 1 and 2 all the way up till last year of engineering or last year of medicine. I fortunately never had to take any such help until grade 9 because, again, the boards come in, right? We felt the need that, I needed some additional help. It didn't really work, but we tried.
So the board exams are really interesting, and I think you talked a little bit about practical aspects, and I think a lot of instructors would understand that to mean assignments, but actually that's not what you mean, right?
So the practical exams, it's not the same as assignments, but that's not to say that we don't get assignments. We do. We call it homework. Practicals are actually a lecture where, the instructor is in the lab and they're the experiments that we are learning about in the theory, we are doing them in practice. The board exams, it's an 80-20 division. The theory will be 80% of the grade, so 80 marks, and the practical would be the remaining 20. So it's not the same as assignments because it's done in class. It's basically a pre-planned schedule. In a day, you will sit for these 5 lectures or these 7 lectures, and each lecture will be at least like 40 minutes, 50 minutes. You sit in the same place, in the same room, and the instructors keep changing. So the students stay in the same room.
That's a huge difference, right? So you're in a class with the same students for your program or your course, as you would say, for your program. And so you know all of those students really well, I would imagine.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then so you have that peer support network, which is really
Absolutely.
different here at our universities. We don't have that. You're often in different classes all the time, on a different campus sometimes.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, you do get really close to the classmates. But it's very difficult to sit through, let's say, 5 hours or 6 hours of lectures at a stretch. Yeah, even though you can have 2 classes here in a day, which would result in 6 hours of classwork, but somehow it's manageable to do this because then you get to choose on which day you want to do that and how much difference do you want between the 2 classes. Over there, it's like you're doing that every day. So again, the tuition aspect comes into picture, right? Because the student is after a while exhausted. If 5 days a week you are having to sit through lectures of all kinds. I've sat through 4 lectures already. The remaining 3 are something that I don't like. So you just be like, okay, I'm just going to take off and I'm going to figure out what happened in the class later. So it is a sad reality, and that's where the tuition comes into picture. So then you can study what was missed.
And so is attendance something that's tracked at Degree College in India?
Yes. Again, not all of the institutes do that, but most do. My college was also tracking it, but it was not as strict. If you're away quite a bit, they would reach out to your parents.
So that makes me laugh because here it would be unthinkable that we would reach out to a student's parents, actually. So in fact, that would breach confidentiality for us.
Yeah.
So that's a big difference.
Yeah. In degree college, it's straight up, So if you're absent for more than 25% of the entire semester, you just simply have to repeat the semester. I think I should introduce another concept to you. So it's called allowed to keep the term, which basically means that, let's say there are 5 courses in one semester. Let's say you fail one course. You are allowed to take the second semester, but in that second semester, along with the 5 exams of that semester's courses, you'll also have to give the exam for the one course that you failed in the first semester. So that's called allowed to keep the term. If I do fail a course here, I have to do the entire course again. But over there, it's like you don't have to do the course again. You just have to give the exam again.
Okay, so I think we've learned a lot. Wow, there's so much to learn, so many different things, and I'm just fascinated by all of this. So let's just move then into your experience here, and what happened when you came here. What was it like when you came to UFE? What do you remember?
It's been 5 years. Now that I think about it. So August 2018. Yeah, the first couple of months were difficult. Obviously, I was extremely homesick. Other than that, classroom, the curriculum, how we are graded is different. So I didn't do very well in my first semester. So, if you look at my transcripts, you'll see my remaining semesters are so much better than my first one. But because I did so poorly in my first semester, my grade point average, it took a hit. But I was able to recover a good amount of it. So I ended up with a decent, above average grade point at this point, I would say. But the first semester really affected. And the crazy part is that those were the easiest courses. When I say easy, I mean that I'd already done those things in India. Similar subjects, right? I think communications was one of them. Statistics 106. Again, that's something that we study in grade 12. Again in first year degree college. And then now again. So it was essentially I was doing it for the 3rd time. And you get to use calculators here, which you don't get to do it in India. So even still, I ended up with a very poor grade in that. When I look back, I don't really know what went wrong in that. Partly because I didn't understand the importance of the assignments, because that course was graded, like a good chunk of it was assignments and then the exam and then the finals as well. Partially it's dealing with all of the emotions plus the, hey, I guess it's just the midterm and final that we are graded on, and then you realize that 30% of the marks were just assignments. So if you don't do them, you straight away are losing 30%. I'm not saying I lost the entire 30%, but even if I lose 15 of it, I am now, my final grade is out of 85%, right? And I know I'm not that great that I'm going to score full 85. So realistically, I'm looking at 70 anyway. So by the time you reach 70, you are like at the C minus something. So if you get a C minus in a course like this, which is a prerequisite for another course, you have to take the course again. Even though technically you did not fail. So yeah, you try not to get there.
Yeah, and you told me of a story that where you didn't quite make it.
Yeah, there was one course I ended up with a C minus. I needed 2 more marks somewhere in the entire semester. If I would have gotten that 2 extra marks, I would have gotten a C and I wouldn't have to study it again. In my mind, I know I haven't failed the course, but I still have to do it again. So it's as good as failing it, right? And I'm not complaining about it as such, because yeah, it is an important course and I need to know the content. So a C minus doesn't really instill confidence that the student knows the course content. So that's fair. But then there's an aspect of the money, which is $2,000 per course. Student takes 5 courses a semester. Now it's 4, I think. The full course workload is 4 courses. But when I had just come, it was, well, even when I graduated, it was 5 courses. So if I have to do the course again, I have to pay $2,000 more the next semester or whenever the course is being offered. And if my course planning is very precise, so when I say precise, I mean that if I am here for 2 years, 4 semesters, and I have to do 20 courses, that is 5 courses per semester. So there is really no scope for any, like there's no wiggle room, right? What that does is that when you're coming here to study for 2 years, your work or your study permit is also valid for 2 years. In a situation like this, then what you have to do is you have to extend your permit, because you know that you're realistically not going to complete it. In my case, I got lucky because I wanted to do co-op as well. So I had to apply for a permit anyway. The flip side to that is that this course was a prerequisite for another course. So unless I complete this course, I won't be able to take another course. So it's not like I can wait till the last semester to take this course. I have to take it, let's say if this happened in my second semester here and I have 2 more semesters left, I have to take it in the next semester so that I can take the other course in my last semester. So it's a domino effect as well. So too many variables change if something like this, which was not originally on the plan, happens.
So when you realized that you were 2 down, did you contact the instructor?
I did, yes. I did speak to the instructor, and the instructor was kind enough to go over my submissions. But they were honest, and I appreciated that as well, is that they're like, there is no scope for any more grades. I'm like, okay, I had to try, because as I mentioned, there were too many variables that were affected because of this, for me anyway.
Yeah, and so you reached out to that instructor and asked them to review your grades. And so we had this conversation about, is that normal? Because I get a lot of requests or a lot of comments from instructors saying, I receive these requests fairly often, and they often mention that they pay this tuition. And they tell me sometimes, the instructors, that it makes them feel that students feel entitled to grades. But when I hear you speak about it, it doesn't sound like entitlement to me. It sounds like, I have no other option. This is going to cost me a lot of money, and I have to try. So that to me it's a really meaningful difference and something really important that instructors should know. But we also talked about grade challenges in India and how easy that is to do. Can you mention that?
Yeah. So we spoke about how students don't really feel hesitant to go up to an instructor and say that, hey, can you please recheck my work? Because the class strength is massive. Like the particular college, the degree college that I went to. So I went to an institute for my first year and second year of Bachelor's of Science in Information Technology. That's a 3-year course, of which I did 2 years, and then I came here. So in those 2 years, there were 5 different divisions in the same course. program for better understanding. So there are 5 divisions, each division having at least 80 students, 80 to 90 students. So you do the math, right? It's a lot of students. So when instructors are also grading, they're human. It's possible that there is an error. Sometimes there's a calculating error at the end because it's all done by hand. Well, when I was there, we were not using online learning platforms, right? So it was all handwritten exams and hand graded exams as well. So it's natural for the instructor to sometimes make a calculating error. So after the evaluation is done, they would hand out the papers in the class. Students can feel free to cross check with other students, compare the answers. Let's say you got full marks in one particular question, whereas I got out of 10 you got 10, out of 10 I got 7. So I'll come up to you and I'll see what you've written. I'll compare your notes with mine. Do you have any points that I missed? Sure, then I'll take the 7. But if our answers are almost similar, so then I'll go up to the instructor and be like, yeah, you know what, it's the same answer. Can you at least explain why why you've graded me less? Especially me personally, I would be like, yeah, if the instructor makes sense, then I'll take it. If I've earned the grade, then I want it. But if not, then sure. And in terms of board exams, when you don't get to see the exam, so board exams are obviously evaluated at a state level or at the board level, whereas I think you mentioned British Columbia has a similar board exam. So students don't usually get to see the answer sheet. They just get the mark when the grade is released, and there you can see the toppers and everything. That's when you know that the average is so and so. But you don't get to see the exam. You don't get it in hand, whereas you're so used to it. So in that case, if you think that, my math exam went really well, but I've just gotten, let's say, 80%, whereas I know I should have gotten a 95 at least. So then you can, contest it. So then you can request for a re-evaluation. You can also request for pictures of your answer sheet. Then you can see what your notes are. And I think based on the pictures, if you still think that, you've written all these things, but you still haven't gotten the mark, then you can contest it. But again, there's a fee to it because someone actually has to actually fetch through your exams amongst a lot of students, right? Yeah, but it's a normal fee, and nobody takes it personally, and I know we spoke about this as well, is that instructors feel that the students are entitled, but we don't mean to offend anyone. We hope nobody takes it personally because it's our exam, and if I am confident that I've written a good enough answer to get the grade, then at least I can discuss it with the instructor at the very least. It's not a question on their competence or their ability. It's just my confidence in mine,
Well, and I think that's again, it's so important when I hear you talk about that, and I think about how well people do on those board exams, and then you talk about your first semester and how you didn't do so well in your first semester. That must be quite a shock to feel that, and I can understand in that moment that you go, I need to understand this. Is this really true for real? And that you might request in that moment to have something rechecked or explained. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't consider myself an exceptional student. I'm not very academically inclined, but that semester was a really bad grade. Right? I'm like, if I continue down this road, I might not graduate. I might not meet the minimum requirements to graduate, right? So I need to really figure out what's wrong. And it's not like I don't know the course content. I'm more than capable to pass these classes with a good grade, but to understand what is wrong, that was a challenge.
So I think that leads really well into one of our core questions, which is, what are some things that have made you feel powerful and powerless at UFV?
Yeah. It's a thinker for sure because, it's been a while. Well, let's first talk about what made me feel powerful. So financial independence for sure, but that came a little later when you realize that you can fund the rest of your tuition, the rest of your program. That's a good feeling to get that first job. That felt good. Knowing that I can connect with these people, knowing that I fit in, because that was a major challenge, a major doubt that students have before coming here. It probably came easier to me than most, and that's probably one of the reasons why I've managed to get so many different roles in and around campus, because this quality, what it comes naturally to me to, get to speak with anyone. Like even right now, I'm just rambling because you're asking questions which I don't usually get to talk with people, right? So that helped me get my first job in UF International. So I was working as a global student ambassador. So knowing that I am good enough to do this job and I have this quality that helps me navigate through all of this easily, that made me feel powerful. I come from a joint family as well, so having my own room, my own space, like my life choices are now mine. My parents might take a little bit of offense to that, but my parents have been very supportive and very open to, but not everybody has that luxury. So if I were to generalize, it would be like some sort of freedom, because you have to make your own life decisions. Not all of them, but some.
That's amazing. So yeah, your powerful moments sound really like, finding your strengths, finding, what you're good at and what your calling is, and feeling that you could explore that and do that here and give back. That is something that I'm really learning through this podcasting process, is that most of what makes students feel powerful is about how they can contribute. And I really appreciate that insight that I've learned from all of you.
Yeah, thank you.
So the hard part of the question now.
Yeah, the powerless. Where do I start? Not having control of things. If I were to summarize it, the TLDR version of it is like not having enough control over things. What I mean by that is, for example, if I have to take a class, and let's say I'm on a wait list, I want to take it with one particular instructor whose class is on wait list, probably you will not get in. But there's this other instructor and you've never dealt with this individual, you don't know how they are, whereas the other instructor, you have a rapport with them, you've taken a class before, so you don't have another option but to take this class with this individual. And this is a good case scenario. Like worst case is when there's just one instructor teaching one course in this semester, you need it to graduate, you need it to complete a minor maybe, and it's full. So what do you do now? You either wait for this next semester or you take another course. So then it's a compromise. And then it strikes a nerve, is that if I'm paying so much money, to give context to the listeners, it's 5 times the money that a domestic student would pay. I'm not taking anything away I'm not saying that because I'm paying so much money, I should have all the preference in the world. That's not what I'm saying. But if these are things which are mandatory to graduate, and if you are admitted into a program, you shouldn't not graduate because you could not take a class for which you are perfectly qualified. So it's sheer timing. So that's when you feel powerless, is that I didn't do anything wrong, but I'm still not able to take this class. I'm still on the wait list. Second part to that is that as I mentioned earlier, like if I have to do a course again, now I have to figure out everything along with that. So I have to figure out my visa situation, my immigration situation. That also makes you feel powerless, is because after you've applied, there is nothing you can do. So now you're just waiting for an answer from IRCC, which could be positive or negative. You're powerless now. You can't do anything. Because when I was doing a co-op, I had made up my mind before coming. So the main reason why I chose to come to Canada as opposed to the US was because Canada was offering a co-op option, whereas US institutes were not. And Canada was offering off-campus work, whereas US was not. So my mind was set that I wanted to do a co-op before I graduate. After coming here, I realized that I have to actually study for 2 semesters to be eligible to apply to the co-op program. It took me four months to get the permit. So 1 complete year to just get a permit.
Well, and for people who don't know, so the IRCC is the regulating body that issues the visas.
Yes. So Immigration, Refugees, Citizenship, Canada.
Oh, good. You know the name. I don't.
I've been on the website so much that it's hard to forget now. It comes in my dreams.
This is burned in your brain.
Exactly.
And so you also mentioned something that I thought was really interesting about uniformity across the classes. So how many different ways of instructing and organizing Blackboard shells, etc.
Yes, absolutely. Over here, what the challenge is that every instructor will have their own grading scheme. Some will grade you on midterm and final alone. Some will give you an exam every week. The course content is also different because the instructors design their own course content. The mode of assessment is also different. So if I'm taking a course which has multiple sections, multiple instructors will have different course materials. It's not going to be the same. Not all instructors will use third-party softwares as well. So there are instructors who will use, they will ask you to buy an access code of a particular software, which is $200-300, right? So it's as expensive as a textbook. Now, it does make it easier for the instructor to grade because the software does it for them. I see the value for the instructor in it, but it's the students who are paying it from their pocket. And in those softwares, the softwares are not always foolproof. So let's say if it's a fill in the blank and your answer is correct, but your spelling is wrong, you don't get graded for it, right? So I don't think that's fair.
That's a topic that we haven't touched on yet, is around this idea of, materials and equity around access to those materials. So certainly thinking for instructors to think about, how much do those materials cost? What are the benefits? What are the drawbacks? Is a really important question. And I really appreciate that you raise that because it is very variable.
To add to that, if it's a physical textbook, I can purchase it from you who studied it already. So, I can probably pay less than what it is, the MRP is. And then I can further on sell it to the next person. So I'm making a fraction of the money back when I sell the book. With the code, there's no scope for it. I still have a communications textbook, which I think retails for $200 or something. I bought it for $25 from Books to Go.
So that actually brings us to a good spot to talk about advice. So our last question today, we always finish up with, from your experience, what advice would you offer to faculty or staff to create more inclusive spaces?
I guess I'm going to stick to the same point, is that probably some uniformity. Uniformity would be definitely nice to have. The instructor's presence is another aspect. There are some instructors who are almost always available, but there are instructors who are not available at all outside the classroom. So, there's a huge gap in there. I understand their point of view as well, is that they have a lot of students to reply back to. So it might take some time, but make sure there's always a reply. Like, student does not want to be ghosted by the instructor. That's you can't be more helpless. You can't feel more helpless than that as a student. That's the one point of contact I know. And if I'm not getting a reply from them, where do I go?
Yeah, and I do appreciate you commenting that, being ghosted makes you feel so powerless. So having some really clear guidelines in place and expectations that are shared around, because I do also know that students, on the other hand, sometimes email, an hour before the assignments due, or in the middle of the night, or on the weekend.
I'm not justifying that at all.
No, exactly. And so there's got to be some good expectations,
Absolutely.
right? Some clear expectations that are reasonable for everybody.
Absolutely.
And thinking about what those might be is a great conversation to have in the class, I think. Yeah, really, really important. That and, prompt feedback.
Yeah.
That's another thing that's really clear in the teaching and learning literature, is the need to turn those assignments around in a reasonable time so that students can get that feedback.
That's another thing, Again, two different extremes. I've had instructors who are grading as soon as you submit it. I have instructors who don't grade it till the very end. So until the final grade is posted, you don't know how well your midterm was. You don't know how much you scored on your assignments, your project. And that's just like, at least show me the division of grades so that I can tell you, or I can check my work and see if there was any gap anywhere. I speak of the negatives because they are a problem. Obviously, if they were not a problem, then we wouldn't have been discussing about it. There are obviously a lot of good things as well. And these instances that I'm talking about, if I were to take a holistic approach, it's not even 5% of my overall experience. More often than not, instructors have been really helpful for students in all aspects.
And I appreciate you recognizing the hard work of instructors that do the work,
absolutely.
and that, and I know they appreciate it too, because there are many of them out there, and many of them listen to this podcast. So, so I do want to recognize.
I mean, if anybody recognizes my name or my face, please feel free to reach out.
Yeah, so I think that's probably a good note to end on, as just recognizing the good and the bad and that we always can do some things to improve. So I want to thank you so much for coming in today. We've had great conversations. I know we're going to have many more, and I'm sure our listeners have learned a ton. I know I learned a ton from you. So to our listeners, if you have questions about today's episode or you have ideas for future episodes, do feel free to reach out to me, Victoria Surtees. That's victoria.surtees@ufe.ca. And if you found the show interesting or useful, do tell a friend. We love to get new listeners, and let's learn differently together. Thanks, and until next time.
Thank you so much, Victoria.
ICTA is hosted by UFE's Teaching and Learning Center and sponsored by UFE International. Music by Saint Soldier.
No matter how long it takes us, no matter how much this world breaks us, may we live here in peace, live here as one, from Bolivia to Greece, from India to Canada and everywhere between. Namaste to everyone I see. Namaste, I recognize that it's one. Namaste, and the suffering is done. Suffering is done, suffering is done. Ayo, namaste, ayo, namaste, ayo, namaste, ayo, namaste, ayo, namaste, ayo.